for you today. This one, The Rules of Thinking by Richard Templar. First of all, why would this book be worth reading? It's quite clear that decision making and the ability to think about what's going to happen next, what's going to happen in the future, how events will play out, what is the most likely scenario, how things actually work, what's meaningful signal rather than just noise. This book will help one to think more clearly and equips the reader with a number of different tools and strategies for thinking about the world, such that their understanding of reality might be more accurate. They're better able to analyse situations and act in a way that is more likely to produce successful results. So I think anyone who intends to improve themselves, and clearly everything comes from here, comes from the brain. That might seem obvious when you say it out loud, but so many people run around like headless chickens, and they rarely just stop and ask themselves, what am I actually thinking? What am I actually feeling? They haven't really practiced self-awareness. They're not really thinking about their mood, and so the thoughts that are taking place in their mind might merely be a product of being in a bad mood. They may have just come back from work, they're tired, they're anxious, they've got a lot of stress, and their judgment of a situation might be severely impacted. They might think things are a lot worse than they actually are. They may not realise that it might just be a small problem that might go away, and that there might be other factors which they don't know at that moment or are not considering, because their heads become cloudy and full of noise and nervous energy. So the book contains 100 rules. The author has written a book on rules to achieve calmness. And really the two go hand in hand. What I've tried to do in this video, is distill some of what I think are the most important rules in the book. The first, I would say, is becoming more self-aware, so that you can clear your emotions and think more clearly. It's so important to, particularly if a decision is an important one, for example, what car to buy, which house to possibly buy, if it's a choice of A, B, C, D or E, relationships, if one is considering proposing, making sure they've found the right person, whether or not to go for a particular job. There are some decisions which clearly are going to have a lasting impact on somebody's quality of life. Some decisions might be quick decisions that need to be made on the spot, and they're not going to have lasting impact. But for the really big decisions, it's quite clear that what one should try to do is get rid of all of the negative emotions as much as possible. They tend to cloud judgments and stop the person from thinking rationally and logically about the best course of action. And I don't think we can state this importantly enough. It's so clear that many people are motivated by emotions, and they simply do not stop and exercise self-control, just sit still and just observe the thoughts that are going on in your head and just try to calm things down, look at the situation from a number of different angles and perspectives, and then come up with likely outcomes, and then just consider which of those outcomes would be the best one, and then to think about how one can work towards realising that outcome. And this clearly involves a certain level of stillness. In the book, some of the rules are quite repetitive. If I had to criticise the book, I would say that the author has spoken about the same rule a number of different ways. So, for example, the author has talked about becoming more self-aware, clearing your emotions, but they seem to be more or less about the same thing. And it's about just self-reflection, taking a minute to walk away from a highly intense situation, particularly if you're angry as well. Like if you're angry, that can be a very destructive emotion. What you can say when you're feeling uptight can have quite severe ramifications, particularly if it's in the workplace or if it involves a relationship. Sometimes it might be necessary. I wouldn't say always avoid saying what you think, but clearly in some environments a tempered approach, one that one is in control of and exercises some moderation, generally speaking, is going to lead to better outcomes. Just acting in a volatile, irrational way is going to be very energy consuming as well. But when one is in a state of anger and a state of fear, fear is also a crippling emotion. If you're scared, you're worried about what's going to happen, that can be all consuming as well. You can literally freeze and not get the motivation to actually get up and do things and get the ball rolling, because you're worried about, oh, this might happen, that might happen, what if this happens? And you know, you can become like a dog chasing its tail. But the first thing to get to a state where you become more in control of your own brain and your own emotions is just to observe your mood. One of the things I think the book recommends is possibly keeping a diary of your mood. So from time to time, just maybe stop and just ask yourself, how am I feeling at the moment? On a scale of 1 to 10, what is my mood right now? And it might seem silly and a bit childish, but I think just being aware of your own mood is a useful thing. One thing the book does mention is that you know, you want to be a friend to yourself. You want to like yourself. So almost treating yourself like as someone who you're trying to treat well, and asking, how do you feel today? What's bothering me? What's really getting on my nerves, and how can I solve this problem? Because then you can look at a number of ways. Once you've observed these emotions, then you know that they're there, and then you can find ways to deal with them. One of the most effective ways is, of course, to talk to family and friends. This is probably the best way to solve problems and to feel better about problems, is to actually talk to people around you. And this can be quite a challenge as well, because on the one hand you want people that are going to listen and are not going to quickly turn the conversation and make it seem as if it's all about them. Oh, I would do this, I would do that, oh, I. What you really want sometimes is just a sympathetic pair of ears who listens, understands, and actually genuinely is trying to help you with that problem. It's good to find people like that. They're absolutely, you know, gems. If you can surround yourself with people that are willing to listen and do their best to understand it from your point of view, because of course everyone's point of view and circumstances are different, but finding someone who will actually, you know, imagine themselves in your shoes, and think about what they would do if they were you, this is invaluable. On the other hand, it is important to not create echo chambers and surround yourself with people who just tell you what you want to hear. Sometimes you need that disagreement. You need somebody to play devil's advocate, and to engage in disagreement and argument in order to thrash out, you know, what is true, what is false, why you're wrong, because the chances are you're not doing something correctly, you're not doing something quite in line with the reality, whatever that reality happens to be. Not necessarily you're at least partly responsible, because it could be someone being completely unreasonable and irrational towards you, but in most cases probably it's always a two-way street, and there might be things that you can do, change your approach, change your strategy, and you might come to that conclusion if you talk to people who have experience, having experienced people around you as well that have had bad experiences and overcome, you know, certain challenges and adversity. Once again, absolutely invaluable. So that support network, very, very important. And this will help you to make clearer, more rational decisions that are beneficial in the medium to long term, rather than ad hoc, feels good in the moment, and you let your emotions carry you away. Some people might argue against that and say, well, sometimes you have to live in the moment, you sometimes have to go with the flow, and I think this is true to some extent. The way I tend to think of it is, like, you can think of it like train tracks. You want to have some tracks on the ground, you want to lay out the roadmap and have some guide and some structure and a map of the various places that you're going to and the things along the way, and you want to keep that train on the track. You want to keep the momentum, keep the energy moving towards the destination. It's why it's so important to have a goal, because you need to be moving towards that goal. You know, you can move inside the train. If you're not happy with one carriage, you can move, you can talk to somebody else on a different carriage, but really you want to be moving in one goal, in one direction, and this means absolutely sticking to one goal and persevering and not letting people take you off track, or circumstances throwing you off track. Sometimes it's really important just to stick at something and not get blown away. So this is important. This is all about emotional control, self-control. I would say it's the most important aspect of thinking clearly, thinking rationally, and making better decisions. Is probably thinking them through over a number of days, when you've had a good night's sleep, because when you're tired, you know, you make all kinds of mistakes, and it's important to have a good night's sleep and let time also work to show you where you could be wrong. So make a decision and then come back to it a few days later in different lights, in different circumstances, different mood, having spoken to different people, just giving that thought the criticism that will naturally come its way if you just leave it bubble away, as it were. You will kind of subject it to criticism simply by having it in your head, and then more likely to change your mind for the better, as long as that's a rationally guided process. Another rule, this is rule number 2, but it's also related to rule number 48 and rule number 66, is don't be scared of being different. And a corollary to that is make mistakes and question groupthink. So I've kind of put all of these rules together because I think they talk about the same thing, which is that, you know, I think what is ideal is if the person becomes more independent, is more clearly able to think for themselves, come to their own opinions and not be afraid to express them and say what they think is true and not be afraid to disagree. Like if you're surrounded by people who share an opinion, or you're in the workplace in a meeting and actually you don't agree with what's being said, people have very different personalities in relation to this. Some people absolutely love disagreements, and they can't wait to jump in and say, oh, I disagree, I think you're wrong, because some people get a bit of a kick out of that. At the other end of the scale, people absolutely, they don't want the light to be shone on them, and they just don't want to say anything. They want to keep their head buried in the sand, because nothing is worse to them than feeling that pressure, feeling the heat of disagreement. So people are very different in this regard, and of course at the extremes, both probably are a negative place to be. Just disagreeing for the sake of it clearly is non-productive. It's a waste of energy, it's a waste of time. And on the other hand, being a doormat, essentially not being able to stand on your own 2 feet and say, no, I think you're wrong there, because, and actually I think there might be a better way to do it, and this is what I'm going to suggest we do, because, and it can take a lot of practice to get to that stage where you feel confident in asserting your opinion, and saying, I disagree, I think you're wrong. And a good way to probably develop this skill and this habit is to just start with people around you, like friends and family, and just have, what I used to do in my early 20s, probably too much, is just purposefully disagree with my friends about any topic we happened to be discussing, whether it was football, politics, just play devil's advocate a little bit, just say, well, actually, what about this? Actually, no, what about this? And then you get used to kind of that disagreement, that argument, and try to have some fun with it. But clearly the ability to stay level-headed when everyone is kind of jumping on the bandwagon and all agreeing, and clearly in an echo chamber, maintaining your sense of individuality. Clearly this is going to once again aid in more rational, clear-headed thoughts and decision making. So clearly this is something to develop as well. It goes to the point about making mistakes as well, because one thing the author says in the book is that, in school you're always told that making mistakes is bad and you should avoid making mistakes. But actually mistakes are golden opportunities to learn. If you make a mistake, great, because then you can actually look at it. What went wrong? Why was I wrong? What have I completely messed up? And what can I do to improve this particular aspect? What can I do to improve myself to ensure that this mistake doesn't happen again, or to minimise its probability? And then in this way, it's possible to improve. Self-improvement is dependent on making mistakes. Obviously, you don't want to make irrecoverable, irredeemable mistakes, but making lots of little mistakes is how you improve. It's absolutely vital and essential, because it helps you develop the resilience, and you're going to make lots of mistakes. If you're trying to achieve any goal, you're going to hit loads of obstacles, you're going to fall down. You constantly have to just dust yourself down. Learn from it. Don't just say, okay, that happened, that was a bad day. What can you do to improve, to stop that from happening again? What did you do wrong that day, which maybe increase the chances of that event, whatever it happened to be, of occurring? Clearly this is quite important as well. And then the other rule I really liked was number 25, where the author said, keep learning. And this is something that famously Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, huge advocates for. I should say the late Charlie Munger, unfortunately he died last year. But two men in their 90s, avid readers, just reading machines, constantly reading new books, new material, trying to learn new strategies, thinking about thinking tools that they can apply when analysing companies. In this case, those two were the partners, the chairman and vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, and clearly their job is all about analysis. It's about seeing the wood through the trees, looking at an annual report and deciding whether or not it's a company worth investing in. Famously, Charlie Munger spoke about inversion. One tool he uses is inversion, where he, instead of asking, why should I buy this company, he asks, why shouldn't I buy this company? And then he starts to list reasons why it's a bad choice, why it's a bad company. And you can apply that inversion technique to so many areas of life. If you're trying to think about who might win, a political race, instead of saying, okay, this candidate I think is going to win because A, B, C, D, E, F, it's sometimes more effective to think, okay, why wouldn't this candidate win? And list all the reasons why they wouldn't win, and do the same for the other candidate. And the one who has the less reasons why they wouldn't win, Occam's razor is the most likely candidate to win. So this is a useful tool, and he says it's helped him enormously, achieve the tens of billions of pounds that he made, one of the richest men in the world. And other CEOs have mentioned that the power of it, inverting the problem, just flipping it around, rotating it 180 degrees and just trying to look at it from the opposite angle, it's just one tool that he uses. He uses a number, but yeah, this is clearly quite a big one. He did say that, to the man with a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And he, takes the approach of the Swiss Army knife, in that he wants to come up with as many tools, as many strategies, as many ways of thinking, which are going to improve his ability to make the best decisions, and as a consequence make lots of money for the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway. So two absolute role models in relation to their sheer willpower and determination to constantly improve themselves and to constantly learn. Clearly they've benefited enormously from many years of study and of reading, and from different areas as well. So I just wanted to leave that with you today. So if you do want to check out the book, being perfectly honest, there might be other books in the category of self-improvements and of critical thinking and of improving your ability to think. There might be other books which might be a better option than this one. This would be a very good book to start with, if you just want basic tips that you can incorporate into your daily life. Some will stop and make you think. So if you're kind of newcomer to this area of thinking more clearly and becoming a better decision maker, this would be a good book to buy. And I got this one from W.H. Smith, but I'm sure you could buy a copy on Amazon. But it's a good book to read, and it's perfect for trains if you're on the train, or on public transport. It's quite easy to read. It doesn't require too much intense focus, so you could read it in a moderately noisy environment. So hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.